Did you know that Dragon Quest Monsters has its own manga series? No, I'm not talking about Dragon Ball or The Adventures of Dai or The Mark of Erdrick or even the makings of Dragon Quest. I'm talking about Dragon Quest Monsters Plus, the 5-volume series by Mini Yoshizaki. And today we're going to be taking a look through this series and seeing whether or not it's something worth reading in your own time. So welcome everybody, I'm the Feeder of Souls, and if you're interested in Dragon Quest Monsters content, that's what I cover. Feel free to subscribe to my channel and see if there's any other videos you like. Now, before we get too far, I should mention that I have not read a lot of manga. Now, I have read one or two, but usually when I read, which I do a lot, I usually prefer a little more word than pictures in my books. That being said, I'm still going to be judging this compared to some of the other manga I read as the most fair point of comparison. But I'll also just try and make sure that it can stand on its own, because comparison is something that we don't want to do too much because it kind of belittles great things by comparing them to greater things. Little tangent aside, what is Dragon Quest Monsters Plus? Well, I'm glad you asked. It is the 2012 series made by Mini Yoshizaki. Mini Yoshizaki, whose name I probably mispronounced, is most famous for his series Sergeant Frog, which is a satirization of militarism with some slice of life elements, and a frog as a protagonist. A winning formula, clearly because it's his most popular work. Anyway, Mini Yoshizaki first got the copyright to work on Dragon Quest Monsters in the year 2000. So what he did for those 12 years in order to get this entire series out, I don't know. The reason why I call it a 2012 series is because all 5 novels were released during the year 2012. However, they did not receive an English translation until 2019, where they were translated by Seven Seas Publishing. They did a pretty good job too, I must say. I did not notice any weird translation things throughout, which makes it much better than reading it on suspicious places in the internet. Speaking of the internet, how are you going to have access to this lovely novel if you're interested in this lovely novel series? Well, the main way you can access it is through Amazon's Kindle for about $10 a book, which I don't know what the average price for manga is, but at the same time, it seems rather reasonable. I burned through these books in about a day, though, because I'm a fast reader, so maybe that's a little spendy for your taste, but either way, it's up to you. You could also buy physical copies on various sites. They generally range from around 8 to 15 bucks, so either way that seems to be the average price for it, depending on what you value in your book's prices. That may be too much or too little for you. Now, of course, there might be some of you that says, "Ha, sucks to be you, I'm just gonna pirate it." Well, I have some bad luck for you. What do you think I tried to do first? Now, of course, I'm not allowed to legally condone piracy, but I can say, if you do attempt to pirate this series, you're gonna find yourself pretty much out of luck. There's never been anything pirated past the first book, so although you could read a very poorly translated version of the first novel, you could also, just spend $10 and get the first novel to see whether or not you like it, and you can also read free samples on the Kindle to see whether or not it would be interesting. So, I hate to say that piracy is not going to work for you, but you might be able to find a way, and hey, maybe one of you will go ahead, buy it, and scan it, but if you do, that is not my fault at all. I take no blame for that. Well, that's enough looking at the stuff around it. Let's actually take a look inside. Since this is a book and it has a story, there are 3 main things you gotta look at anytime you're talking about any story, and these are the 3 main things we're gonna be talking about, hopefully without spoilers, within this video. That is your story, your plot, your characters, and your setting. Of course, this is a manga, so we also need to talk about art as well, because that's an integral part to any manga or any identity of any visual media. Let's start with the art, because I am not an artist. If you've seen any of the 3 videos on screen, you're gonna know that. I do not know what makes art good, I just know what I like. So, when I say I like the art in this manga, that's a good thing. It is kind of soft, it never gets too intense, but there's still epic moments. There's also a chance that Mine was trying to imitate Akira Toriyama's style, but I have no proof of that because I, 1, am daunted, very, very daunted at the thought of trying to read the entire Dragon Ball manga, and 2, I just don't want to make comparisons. I already said that earlier. So let's just say that it's pretty good. It's kind of soft, but at the same time, it doesn't look bad. It's very fine, and there are many scenes in here which just look epic regardless. So, with that aside, art is pretty good, gets a pass from me. Let's talk about the story. Now, of course, it's a manga. This is kind of the main drawing point. Well, the story is incredibly simple. It takes place almost directly as a sequel to the original Dragon Quest Monsters game, even giving you a little recap at the start so you remember what happened. But if you didn't, then simple enough. Terry goes to Great Tree, has to do some stuff in order to try and save his sister while also winning the Starry Night tournament for the Kingdom of Great Tree. There you go, I just summed up the story of that game in about 3 seconds. This place takes place directly after that, while Terry has gone missing after some unknown period of time, so Great Tree is struggling. There seems to be some kind of curse known as the Wave of Evil. As a result, monsters are attacking Great Tree, and more monsters are leaving. With this horrible situation, Wadabu is in need of help, so he goes and finds reluctant hero Cleo, and brings him here to become a monster master, something cooler than being a hero, and hopefully he can find Terry and maybe, save the world, who knows. So, as you can kind of tell from that little synopsis there, it's not the most original story, but at the same time, it is perfectly serviceable. Just like the art, there's nothing directly bad about it, besides the fact that it's a little unoriginal. But, I mean, you have a good time, and while I was reading it, I had a good time. So, once again, can't complain, can't take too many jumps. A few other small spoiler parts here. You can skip to the timestamp on screen if you want to go into this completely pure, or if you care, I suppose. While the original Dragon Quest Monsters game had Terry go through Traveler's Gates into procedurally generated areas, this does not follow that structure. One, because trying to simulate procedural generation in a manga is a very curious task, and I'm interested to see how that would actually turn out now once I actually start thinking about it. But instead, they actually have the Traveler's Gates Cleo go through be old legacy Dragon Quest games. That's right, he goes into the world of the likes of Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 2, which is pretty epic. It also has some other things, but we'll get to those later when I get to some of the bigger problems I have with this series. So, welcome back to the people who decided to skip this part because of spoilers. Either way, the story is pretty strong. I mean, not strong, but once again, completely serviceable. Let's talk about the characters. Cleo is just like the story he inhabits, 100% unoriginal. He's kind of, your classic anime brat, that child. He's kind of like, think Ash from the Pokemon anime. Yeah, he's kind of like that. He's not really pleasant, but you just kind of go with it anyways. And of course, instead of Pokemon, he gets some smart talking monsters, which really helps humble him. What's that? You didn't expect the monsters to have personalities? Well, of course the monsters have personalities. How are you supposed to be friends with them otherwise? That's right, one of the main monsters in which you're going to be accompanying Cleo in his adventure is going to be Slib the Slime from, once again, the original Dragon Quest Monsters game. Something I should mention here, because it might come up a few more times, is that this series has all sorts of references, not just to Dragon Quest Monsters, but a lot of the older Dragon Quest titles in general, and it's really awesome, especially if you're a big fan of the entire series as a whole. I honestly loved multiple moments when I recognized something or some other reference from another game, so that's another factor worth considering if you're interested in this series. Anyway, Slib the Slime, who is the original slime from the original Dragon Quest Monsters, he is also here, and his personality is also not noteworthy. That seems to be the trend here, because although we do have an interesting cast of characters, from the protagonist to the antagonist, none of them really stick out as characters that, really, draw your attention. They're not really too memorable, because they kind of fade into all the other characters that have followed the same tropes. Once again, though, we're going to try and stay away from comparisons, because it's unfair, but at the same time, you're not giving us a lot here to really stand out. So that's most of the factors. That just leaves one last one, and that's the setting. Now, I've already mentioned this, but it takes place in the world of Dragon Quest Monsters, which is a great setting that we still don't get fully explored, even though it's been 25 years, well past 25 years since the original game was released. And honestly, this manga series does a fairly good job actually exploring some of those worlds. For example, did you know that the Kingdom of Dead Tree is the one tree kingdom that we never see in Dragon Quest Monsters? Well, we actually get to see it in this manga, and, well, it's a dead tree, would you expect? So, anyway, the setting is already very strong simply based off the source material, and it does a really good job exploring it. So, probably out of all these things, this is what it does the best. So those were all the main factors. So the question is this a perfect series? No. Time for me to list all the problems that I have with it, and there's going to be some more spoilers in this section, so boom, there's another timestamp for the people who care. But besides that, let's get talking about it. Something I've mentioned multiple times is the series is rather generic, which is not necessarily a problem. It's just it's kind of a sticking point. I do appreciate original content, and that's why I'm always supporting small YouTubers like myself because, they're trying something new sometimes. So small stuff like that would be great. It's just we don't get a lot of that here. Now, to be fair, what they do have works well, but, sometimes you just kind of wish you had a little bit more. I do think that the thought of exploring other worlds is a great idea. I just kind of wish that they had the ability to explore more. When I said they explored the worlds of other Dragon Quest games, that's only Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 2. So we don't really get a lot of screen time from every other game, although we do get plenty of references for them. That aside, though, I will digress that because of this series, my favorite Dragon Quest hero of the mainline series is now officially the one from Dragon Quest II. If you read the series, you're going to understand why. Final thing, and this is probably my biggest problem with the series, and it also happens to be, the biggest spoiler in this video, so there's another timestamp if you really don't want to. And that's because of the ending. The ending to this series is the most dissatisfying ending I have seen in a long time. Now, like I've said before, I do read a lot, I play a lot of video games, I've watched plenty of movies. I am not unfamiliar with having an unsatisfying ending to a visual media or something I'm reading, and it is disappointing, nothing sucks more than thinking, why did they end it that way? But, sometimes you can still see the vision. You can still see, alright, I kinda see what they're going for, even if I don't agree with it. This case, I have no idea why they ended it this way. Alright, once again, here's your final warning. This is the ending. We get it set up, we finish exploring the Dragon Quest II world, we get to see the true power of the main antagonist, just hinted at. Cleo gets a new party, everything is set up, the story is just beginning, we have multiple characters who we've barely seen any of that are teased to be either very important protagonists or antagonists, allies or enemies, we don't know. Everything is set up for a grand continuation, or maybe an epic final battle, and then it just ends. There's so many things that could have been done that weren't done, and I've not been able to find a single reason why. It's not because the author died, he's still around making great stuff, presumably. Is it a copyright problem? I mean, did he just not want to do it anymore? I literally cannot find any reason why, but the ending of this series is just, it's dissatisfying, it really is disappointing. Because it just ends. It doesn't give any resolution to anything. They don't even find Terry and bring him back to safety. Like, we get practically nothing. That's probably my biggest pain point. But besides that, it's pretty good. So welcome back all the people who decided to skip ahead, good choice. So with all that out of the way, how good was this series? Well, it depends on how good of a series you want. If you want a series with epic art styles, law-defying battles, and a deep, thought-provoking story, this isn't really going to cross all those boxes or scratch all those itches. You're going to have a good time, and I did have a good time reading this series, and there are going to be moments where you're like, why is this in here? But it's epic anyways. It is said to be for children 10 and up, but there are multiple moments where you're like, really? There are some moments where it gets really deep and philosophical for some reasons, and honestly, those were probably some of my favorite points when it made me think and just really made me think. What? Well, yeah, okay. Enough thinking out of me, though. Let's get back to talking. Is this really something worth pursuing, though? I honestly struggle to recommend it. Although it is enjoyable, $50 for the entire series is kind of a high asking price, especially since you can get on your whatever console and buy Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince for about that price, maybe an extra $10. You could get on your phone and buy Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince using those $50, and you'd even have some cash to spare probably. That's right, this is it's a lot to ask for. And it's not a perfect series, but it doesn't do a lot of things right, but what it does do right, it does right. It really hits everything that, strong points are high, its high points are high, but at the same time, its low points and its lowest point, it is really low. So I guess the question is, do you have $50 and are interested in seeing what might have happened after the events of Dragon Quest Monsters? Then check this series out. If not, then, well, I'm sorry to say it, but, guess this series ain't for you. And that's all I have to say. So, were you interested in this review and you're interested in maybe other Dragon Quest Monsters content? Maybe subscribe to my channel. I guess just thanks for watching. I should probably have led with that. Yeah, so thank you for watching. Once again, I've already said the subscription thing. If you liked the video, feel free to leave a like. If you have any comments, have you actually experienced this book? Have you read it when you were a child instead of stumbling upon it now as I have recently? Anything like that, please let me know in the comments. I'd be interested to hear from anyone else who's read this series what their opinions on it are. Also, at the same time, if you're interested in me maybe going over it in some way so that people who aren't interested in it enough to want to pay to get it, but are interested enough to know what the story is, any other discussion around this manga, let me know, because if you don't let me know what you guys want, then I can't do anything. So, that's about all I have to say, so it's time to get to the question of the every other week. Last video, I asked out of the 19 monsters covered in that video which one had reappeared in Dragon Quest Monsters The Dark Prince. 2 people were able to get it right, the first being Dr. Coelho and the second being Diana Morton. So thank you both for playing, congratulations, you're both right, and thanks once again for playing along. Now, this time it was a bit harder to come up with the question, but I think I got a good one. Remember, Yoshizaki got the copyright for this series in the year 2000 in order to work on the manga. That means he had reference to Dragon Quest Monsters 2, Kobe and Tara's Adventure on the Game Boy Color, to use as reference. Although he doesn't use it too much, he does have that at his disposal. That's where this illustration comes in. In this lovely illustration, it features multiple monsters which are unique to Dragon Quest Monsters 2. So, my challenge for you is this. Out of all the monsters on here, which ones are completely unique to Dragon Quest Monsters 2 and its remakes? There may be 1 or 2 exceptions, that's up to you to find out. You'll also get bonus points if you can actually give me the names of every single monster on here as well. So that's your challenge, go out and good luck. And that's all I have to say, so thank you very much for watching, and this has been Defeater of Souls.